Welcome to this edition of the Economy and Politics Show. Today, November 11th, 2020, midweek. We call it Wednesday. Police. Since the third quarter of 2019, the federal government closed the borders, and we're looking at how that has impacted the domestic economy and prospects for regional trade and development, and far-reaching impact on the Nigerian population. With me to lead this conversation is Mr. Borokinni Adesola. He's an economist at Proshare Nigeria, the leading financial information hub in sub-Saharan Africa. Nice to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, Borokinni. First, let's begin with smuggling of goods, which was really going haywire. And then, of course, support local production, which is very critical for a buoyant economy, and address the issues of dumping of cheap foreign manufactured goods into the country, which Nigeria, the International Trade Level, has raised concerns, which has led to the issue of anti-dumping and others. For you, has this border closure, the policy around and the economics around it, has it worked for Nigeria in terms of the intent and what was purpose for it?
Okay, thank you. I'll start by mentioning that the policy has good intent, right? But intent is not enough to boost economic growth. Intent is utmost priority or discussion is aside the border closure, aside the discussion of the border closure. If these questions are not properly addressed, it makes border closure ineffective as of this period. The reason why I mentioned that basically is no matter how you close a border to protect your local production, you still basically have to make sure that your production is competitive. And to make your production competitive, what you have to do basically is to concentrate on factors that will bring down your cost of production, right? If you close the border, obviously, and you still face as a producer with epileptic power supply, you have to run on generators. It reduces the effectiveness, right, in terms of cost. Also, another basic question also that needs to be addressed are logistic issues. No matter what you do by closing borders, if you are still faced with logistic issues, the issues of transporting your goods from one location to another, it increases the cost and makes your production, in terms of production capacity, it makes it inefficient, and it gives room for further smuggling.
And one area of concern additionally to the issue of local production, which our president has even talked about several times, is producing local food in terms of, for example, rice. I mean, we have a population of about 160 million people, so we should be able to produce what we eat and supply it instead of course. Let's take an example like rice production. Do you see this border closure helping in that capacity to meet the needs of over 100 million people?
Like I've said, it's a good policy. It has good intent. But once a policy is being embarked upon, you have to critically analyze the cost and benefit of such policy in terms of the short-run effects, the long-run effects, who are the major beneficiaries, who are the major people in terms of cost that this policy is going to affect. Now, there's a statistics that was given as regards Nigeria's yield per hectare in terms of rice production. And according to that statistics, basically, we can see that in terms of comparative advantage, Nigeria really does not really have comparative advantage as regards rice production. Now, to give data to my claims, according to the data, that's as of 2017, China's yield per hectare was as high at 6.8. 6.8. I think Vietnam was also as high as 5.5. But when it comes to Nigeria's yield per hectare was put at 1.1. For me, I feel this is quite worrisome. Am I saying, oh, we should not engage in production at all? No. But what I'm saying basically is consider these factors. Consider, how long do you feel basically you want to engage in rice production? For how long? In the short run, in the long run, do you feel your short run substitutes can meet local production? What happens? What are the factors? What are the activities you are taking to make sure you improve the yields in the short run? So for me, these are pertinent questions. So for me, you have to consider the comparative advantage in the short run and in the long run. In the short run, does it pay for the Nigerian economy to continue importing or exporting continue importing rather, or should it focus on local production? So for me, this is a very important question that needs to be addressed, rather than just saying, oh, let's just engage in production. You have to also ask yourself questions as regards those that are going to produce this rice. How mechanized is the technique for farm production? Do they have proper storage facilities? How is their security? Are they confident that they can return to the farms to properly farm? What is the level of knowledge as regards technology implements that are presently used to boost yield production, to boost rice production? So for me, if these questions are not addressed properly, no matter what you do as regards trying to boost rice production, it will prove counterintuitive in the short run and the long run.
Very important questions that need to be answered there, but I get your point. Initially, you talked about infrastructure, enabling infrastructure policies, and now you talk about the short-term and medium-term and long-term plan. What are those clear plans? And if those questions are not answered, it becomes a challenge. Another major issue around this border economics policy approach and implications for the nation and businesses and even trade has been the concerns around concessions for some companies. This border closure has been in effect for approximately over a year now, but there's been concerns of some companies that have concessions to move their goods and products, export them out of the country amidst the closure. Some senior business leaders have raised their concerns on social media, and just recently Proshare has published an article again on this issue, which at the end of the program we would tell viewers they can go read it further and give us their views around it. But in terms of this whole insights and perspective around this, these concessions and the opportunities, the complaint is that it's just for several few. It should be open up for businesses to also benefit and be part of. What is your thought around this whole development?
Okay, for me, basically, I feel this basically shows the lack of engagement with relevant stakeholders as regards the border closure. I feel the government is engaged or doing what it ought to have done before closing the borders. The government should have engaged the relevant stakeholders, or should have created a transition process whereby it engaged the stakeholders and asked them pertinent questions such as, how is the border closure going to have people that are involved in export and imports that the border closure will affect? What are the things they are going to do in the short, medium to long run to make sure that this border closure does not affect the entire business operation? So for me, I believe this should have been done, right? The policymakers should have engaged these relevant stakeholders, right? What are we going to do? For how long is this border closure going to go on, right? And probably, if there are concessions, that will be done to make sure that these companies don't feel the full burden of such border closure. But what we could see and what we could infer, we can see basically that there was no clear-cut discussion or engagement. And this brings us to the fact that policymakers need to make sure when they make their policy or when they enact their policy, there has to be proper clarity so that both stakeholders, the populace, and international bodies are aware of what is going on, so they can make proper plans as regards such policies. For example, I would see the border closure, for example, looks like a negation as regards the AFCFTA agreement. Oh, you said, we're going to sign an AFCFTA agreement to improve free trade, free movement of knowledge, goods, and technology across borders, and yet you decided to, at that moment, a few months after that time, to impose tariffs or to close your border or shut your border completely. So it looks counterintuitive, and it looks like the government are confused as regards the proper way or proper outline as regards their policy, as regards trade, international trade.
Yeah. And is it too late to have that consultation now with the business community to say, okay, this is what we've seen and developments, and maybe this is the line of activity or direction going forward?
No, it's never too late. I feel they can still do that. We can still speak to the small, medium, medium enterprises that run business around their areas. Engage with them and see how at this moment they can help them survive, or help them move forward with export and import.
Definitely. And one other area that's been affected, like you said, they've should have been broader consultations with all the various key stakeholders, chambers of businesses, chambers, and other key interest groups. One other area that's being affected is the inflation. We've seen how it has been rising. I mean, from that period of Q3 2019, country's inflation has scrambled up from 11% and is now at about 13.7% per annum at the moment. When you look at this surge in inflation, is it not a cause for reflection for policymakers to say, wow, even though there are benefits, like we see in economics, opportunity costs, maybe this is one area we need to look again, like you say, rejig the policy?
Like you rightly mentioned, there are benefits as well as costs of every policy. And it's the function of relevant stakeholders to weigh both options and to see which one is more beneficial for the overall growth of the economy. Now, for as regards the inflation, it's quite unfortunate that the price that the Nigerian economy has to pay is the rise in inflation. As you know, latest inflation figures shows that the headline inflation rate is 13.71%. The food inflation is at 16.66%.
Food inflation is really high.
And this is as expected. As we know, most Nigerian households consume commodities that are being imported through these borders. And to further worsen our present situation, the COVID-19 came unexpected. For me, I won't trace the rise in food inflation and headline inflation just to the border closure. As we can see, around September, October, there was flooding in the northern part. And aside that also, the farmer health crisis is still persistent. Security issues in the northeast, the bandits. Aside that also, you should also look at the trickle-down effects from some of our raw materials that are imported. So all these factors culminated has affected Nigeria's headline inflation and food inflation at the moment.
Yeah. And from this recent article from Proshare, there's a need to, again, address the concerns. While we are saying that there has been some improvement in local agricultural production, which you say, of course, we need to have a short-term and, of course, a long-term plan strategy, and even increase in excise revenues. On the other hand, there are challenges with export of manufactured produce. This also, like you said, the regional trade is being challenged, because if we are going to implement the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement from next year, and we see how this border closure is, therefore, it's like, it's a paradox. It's a challenge for people who want to get that clarity of what we really want to achieve. So, increases in domestic food prices we've talked about, apart from the border, the insecurity and the flooding issues and all that. When you look at these issues, what should be the pathway going forward? I know you've talked about a short-term, long-term plan, but when the policy makers sit down and look at particularly the fact that we are not aligning with the AfCFTA terms by closing the border, and then export of manufactured produce are facing challenges for various companies and businesses who are being affected, what would be the pathway in terms of addressing these gaps in the policy?
Okay, for me, basically, I feel it's high time the Nigerian government reconsiders its policy as regards the border closure. I feel there are better ways to handle the border closure, depending on which side of the debate or coin you choose to be on. And for me, I feel what could be done better was for the government to make sure that some custom officials man those borders, make use of appropriate technology to ensure that smuggling is not engaged in, and to ensure that security of our borders is properly ensured. Aside that also, what they can also do basically is open up these borders to ensure that goods that are flowing through the borders are formalized, right? So that they can be properly accounted for and the revenues are put in the Nigerian coffers. Aside that also, I feel when the government does this basically, it allows a legitimate business that rely on import and export through the borders to carry on their free flow of goods. And aside that also, critically at this moment, given the high rate of inflation also, those legit rights that can move, right, they can move, we expect food inflation to increase. It will provide a temporary solution also. And I feel this will be of great benefit also to some of our neighboring countries such as Benin, Cameroon, and Niger. And And aside that also, I feel if we open up this border at this moment, it also gives credence to the fact that Nigeria is serious about the AFCFTA agreement, right? Because it's like a contradiction to say, oh, we are interested in regional integration and to further impose tariffs on goods that flow through your borders. Now, if Nigeria does that, basically, what it does is to eliminate all form of assertion by various economists and policy analysts that feel that Nigeria is engaging on the beggar thy neighbor policy, right? And this gives credence and confidence, not just to the Nigerian economy, but to the African economy, that we can work regionally, right? And ensure that free trade is being embarked on to boost the growth of the African economy as a whole.
You said we should reconsider the border closure policy, which is very important at this time, looking at the whole assessment. And as someone that always understudies a lot of economies, are there examples of how effective border management has helped?
But for me, there's no country that can work in isolation.
Even the America first.
Growth and development of domestic capacity. Successfully experience and focus on its comparative advantage. And you can see examples of countries like Singapore. What Singapore does basically is to import domestic goods. And what it does basically is to focus on its core capacities, such as manufacturing, aside that oil refinery and financial services. So I feel that's a better pathway towards engineering growth of an economy, rather than just shut your borders and give that mindset to other economies that you're not ready to do business, or you are stiff-necked when it comes to business operations, and allowing the free flow of goods as regards your border.
Those are very, very deep insights. And in wrapping up, Borokinni, what do you think businesses involved in this space can be doing in terms of their strategy? Because you've said this, and it's time for action, and policy may take some period, but a lot of businesses have been affected in this period. How can they re-strategize even going to 2021, considering this whole challenge of the policy?
For me, for businesses, this is the best time to invest in research and development.
Definitely.
Like I said, for every policy, there are costs and there are benefits, right? What research and development does basically is to see ahead, to forecast, these are likely policies that are going to come up, and these are likely effects it's going to have on our business operations. If they can do that, it helps them to strategize on how to effectively make use of alternative channels to ensure that the business does not crumble in the advent of policies that does not favor them. And also what can be done, as we can see the case of BUA and Dangote and the gas, is to, if you feel there are justifiable reasons that will benefit concessions.
Okay, so companies can write and seek.
Yes, to seek
like BUA Cement and the Dangote Cement.
If
I think another company, GasLink, also.
If it's going to justify its purpose to the Nigerian economy, because the Nigerian economy needs value. So I feel the Nigerian government at this moment in time too should be open for value proposition ideas, right? So if it does that, I feel that's another proposition that businesses can also do, and also businesses can also seek other alternative channels. Right, and also, like I said, what the LCCI does is quite good.
The Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry.
Yes.
And NACIMA, the National Chamber of Commerce and Industry and Mines and Agriculture, NACIMA. So
basically, what they can actually do also is to aggressively engage their bodies in which they are members of, probably the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria or LCCI, to make sure that their interest is put first. Because whether you like it or not, businesses, manufacturers are at the heart of discussion when it comes to economic growth. If businesses crumbles, it means that your economy is likely going to crumble, because it has a whole value chain proposition and chain reactions. So it's necessary that these bodies are properly engaged to make sure the interests of businesses and manufacturers of Nigeria are protected by engaging with CBN and relevant stakeholders as regards policies, both fiscal and monetary policies.
Yeah, fiscal and monetary policies. For viewers, this has been a very interesting conversation, and to add impetus to this conversation, Proshare Nigeria's leading financial information hub published an article yesterday, which I'd like you to read. It's very rich concerning border politics and economics and how it affects the populace. The title is BUA's First Approval Before DANGCEM, that's Dangote Cement, and the Politics of Border Economics. Over 1,200 views now, just between yesterday and today, so to show you that it's really rich content. It gives whole perspective around the whole developments around the border closure, some companies getting concessions, concerns, but the imperative for policy and how it affects the economy. Going through this gives a lot of rich context. And in closing the article, it says something very deep here, of course, which Mr. Adesola Borokinni has been really speaking on. It says Nigeria may need to think outside conventional classical trade boxes, but operates within the context of best market practices if it is to gain the full benefits of the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement and ensure a regional status that draws an open market competitiveness rather than ad hoc quick fixes that simply postpone the dark days ahead. So it is very important that this whole scenario is looked clearly with very strategic approaches to move the nation forward. In conclusion, it says, we may look back at this incident and thank the players for elevating the discourse on the subject and make it a central issue. So conversations like this are very important. And I would like you to join the website, www.proshare.com, go to the homepage. This is a top article and it's still trending for you to read to get insight on our conversation today. Any addition, Adesola Borokinni, on this?
No, not really much addition. But we can see the controversies as regards Bua and Dangote.
And there are major players in the cement industry, exporting, producing.
And for me, at this moment also, it would be good for the government to properly clarify and give, like I said, give clarity to the policy and highlight its plans going forward for small, medium, and micro enterprises that engage in the imports and exports near the borders, because this will give credence more to their policy as regards international trade.
Yes,
I think this is expedient at this moment.
Definitely. I mean, from you, there are 2 or 3, 4 things very clear. First is that there's need to make it a short and long-term policy clarity in terms of this border closure. What's the end game? Second is understanding the need for how we can gain competitive advantage, because when you do things like this, you must look at what's the competitive advantage for the country. And third, like you rightly said, there needs to be broader engagement. Prior to now, we don't think there was a broader engagement with all stakeholders before now. So there needs to be clarity in this broader engagement on how it affects all the businesses. And finally, of course, the signaling and the strategy ahead as it concerns the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement is very key. So we don't continue to have a situation where we're part of an agreement, but we're having a policy that contradicts it. Thank you so much, Mr. Adesola Borokinni. It was nice having you once again, economist at Proshare, and being part of the research team that are doing great jobs there, producing interesting articles, insightful articles, and reports back to back. Once again, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
I'm looking forward to having you in subsequent editions to discuss policy and economic developments.
Fully. Thank you very much.
Yes, that was a very interesting conversation. We hope to have much of this in subsequent editions. And that will be all for this edition of the Economy and Politics Show. You can join our website, like we said, www.proshare.com, and you will get this particular interesting article that I've told you. It's on our homepage. It's trending. It's over 1,200 views, talking about Bua's first approval before Dangote Cement and the politics of border economics, the whole developments around this rich context that you can learn from. Also, send your views and comments on the current border closure, the policy, and what do you think the implications for the economy and businesses and the Nigerian populace. Send your views and comments to news@proshareng.com or economy@proshareng.com. Send those views. We would respond appropriately to them, because we like to engage people to get their perspectives also on how they feel about policies and the impact of the populace. To come your way again, thank you for watching. Have a nice day and stay safe.